Blair was as useless as a lifeguard at the Olympics until he was reborn with god-level magic and became the strongest. That moment, he woke up to the sound of people calling him Blair and was shocked to find himself in a classroom surrounded by a bunch of laughing. He wondered where he was and why these worthless youngins were laughing at him. Just then, a blue-haired girl sitting beside him leaned in and informed him that the teacher, Miss Britney, would soon call him out. Before the random blue-haired girl could complete her speech, Blair was completely entranced when he saw the teacher, Britney, and nearly collapsed on his feet. Before he could even process what was happening, Britney grabbed him by the ear and dragged his sorry ass to the front of the class. She demanded that he solve the mathematical equation on the board, but Blair was still trying to wrap his head around the madness of his current situation. Sensing his hesitation, Britney decided to cut him some slack, or so he thought, and told him he could take 3 business days to solve the equation and bring the answer when he was done as punishment for dozing off in class. Meanwhile, the entire class clowned on him, and one particularly ugly yelled out that even if Blair had a century, he'd never be able to solve it. Hearing their opinion of him, Blair suddenly decided to prove these losers wrong. He stepped up, scribbled the answer on the board, and left Britney absolutely stunned that this supposed could perform such wonders. He immediately told the teacher he needed to take a piss and casually excused himself from the room. As he left, everyone stared at the numbers he had scrawled on the board, thinking the ugly must have just made up some random nonsense to save face. But when Britney confirmed that the answer was actually correct, their jaws practically hit the floor. Outside the class, Blair realized that in this new world, mathematics was of great importance, and judging from the recent occurrence in class just now, the body he reincarnated into was a complete with 0 IQ. He decided that since he couldn't figure out why he was in this world, it was best to take advantage of the opportunity and become a top mathematician. As he broods over his next course of action, he accidentally had bumps into a girl named Isabella. He tried humping her up, but then captured her plot in 4D, so he quickly nudged backward to avoid being seen as a disgusting creep. However, Isabella stood up and was disgusted at seeing the ugly clown again. Blair asked her if they had ever met before, and she told the moron that he had also bumped her at the freshman ceremony, making her look like a fool in front of the whole school, and she could never forget his creepy, disgusting face. Blair tried explaining that the situation didn't happen as she claimed it did, as she also bumped into him. But the girl had grown sick of his presence, and just then, she activated a fire spell and was ready to roast him with flames powerful enough to roast the devil himself. Realizing he was about to meet his doom, Blair quickly apologized for being an Hearing his sincere apology softened her stone-cold heart, so she extinguished the fireball, warning him to stay on his best behavior. After the encounter, Blair dashed out of the school building, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend the bizarre world he found himself in, a world where science and magic coexisted. Suddenly, an excruciating pain shot through his head as if it were about to explode. His mind was flooded with sad memories from Blair's pathetic life. He remembered how his father, a respected elder statesman, had died, leaving his once noble family to struggle. Despite their status, his poor mother was forced to do filthy slave work just to provide for him. He also recalled the day this worthless version of himself was accepted into the Magic Academy. Even though he studied tirelessly and read every magic book he could get his hands on, he still couldn't perform a single spell. He was the only loser in the school who lacked both the ability to harness fire magic and the intelligence to solve even the simplest math problems that any dummy with a brain could cook. Just then, he was snapped back to the present by the blue-haired Barbie wannabe Jasmine, who was trying to help him up after he fainted. She informed him of an ongoing magic theory class, and Blair couldn't help but wonder why she was the only person in the world who seemed to care about him. Later that day, as Blair sat in the magic theory class, the useless old teacher, who looked like Dracula battling a midlife crisis, droned on about the 4 basic types of magic: earth, fire, wind, and water. After class, Blair approached the old geezer and asked if it was possible to perform magic without any talent. The teacher coldly replied that without talent, Blair was useless and couldn't even cast the simplest spell, not even one to change his underwear. Crushed by the harsh words, Blair sat alone, brooding over his worthless existence. That's when 2 bullies approached, taunting him as a talentless piece of trash. As they continued to harass him, a voice interrupted, telling them to back off. Blair immediately recognized the voice. It was Toby, his only friend in this miserable world. Meanwhile, Jasmine stood and watched the scene unfold, and Blair caught her staring. Embarrassed, she quickly ran off, but not before informing him that the hot baddie teacher, Britney, had requested his presence in her office. As Jasmine hurried away, Blair couldn't help but wonder why he had all the mathematical knowledge in the world, but lacked any magical abilities. Determined to test his powers once more, he performed some silly hand gestures and uttered gibberish that only a mental patient would understand. He laughed at his own stupidity when nothing happened, thinking it was worth a shot. But then, to his utter shock, a whirlwind of flames materialized from his palm, leaving him completely stunned. So, as he tried to extinguish the fireball in his palm, he marveled at the sudden development of his fire magic, like something out of a firebender's playbook. The realization that Britney had summoned him snapped him back to the moment, and he quickly dashed to her office. Upon arrival at Britney's office, he found her standing in a sus position which showed her well-shaped rice cakes on full display, and he nearly had a seizure. She then apologized for her insensitive behavior and explained that she always assumed that sus position anytime she was engaged in some mathematical calculations. She then asked Blair to sit down and gave him an arithmetic problem to solve. Realizing it might take a whole day for the dude to get the answer, she informed him she would be stepping out for a while. In just a matter of seconds, Blair told her the answer, which stunned her. On hearing the answer, she quickly dashed towards him and asked how he could come up with the answer so fast. Blair wondered how a teacher so smoking could be so dumb. He then schooled her like a third grader and explained that he had a shorter and faster approach to her solution. He further explained that her methods were ancient and could only be used by cavemen, but as he lectured her, he realized her melons were larger than life, so he told her that life was about arithmetic. That instant, Britney was astonished at the living Einstein and wondered how one man could be so smart, which made her want more of his hands-on lesson. So, Bro showed her the arithmetic series formula and explained how the addition of one long item at a particular spot can cause an intense sensation. However, his lesson played with her sense of reasoning and she got lost in thought, so Blair snapped her back to reality. Blair wondered how a math problem so basic could actually shock the scholars of this world. That moment, Britney sat in total awe of his mathematical prowess and termed him a genius. She placed his hands on her mighty cannons and advised him to continue his good work, but the dude nearly had a heart attack from experiencing her good work. Shortly afterward, she asked him if he wanted to be a good mathematician, as she could help. But Blair insisted on being a great magician instead. However, she tried convincing him to stick with mathematics as he was totally talentless when it came to magic. But Blair told her he only wanted to be a magician. Seeing his unwavering resolve, she asked for a bet. She informed him that in a few days there would be a magic test that would determine his stay in the academy. She added that if he could pass the magic test and become a magician, she wouldn't bother him anymore, but if he failed the test, she would help him apply to stay in the school as her assistant and study with her, which Blair agreed. As Blair exited Britney's office, he accidentally bumped into Isabella for the third time in a single day. This time, she was beyond furious. She aimed a powerful uppercut at his jaw, but quickly decided that would be too easy on him. Instead, she summoned a fireball, ready to roast the idiot, but Blair swiftly dashed into hiding, narrowly escaping a fiery doom. Frustrated that she couldn't find him, Isabella stormed into Britney's office, her anger palpable. Noticing Isabella's rage, Britney asked what had happened. Isabella explained her exasperation with the cultured idiot she kept encountering and vowed that the next time she found him, she'd ensure his baby-making device was nothing but ashes. After venting, she showed Britney her completed math assignment, proudly boasting that she'd finished it in half a day. Britney, however, casually informed her that there was a new mathematical prodigy in town who had solved it in less than a minute, which left Isabella stunned. Britney then showed her the impressive method the genius had used to arrive at the answer so quickly, blowing Isabella's mind. Intrigued by these remarkable feats, Isabella insisted on meeting the living calculator in person. Britney mentioned that his name was Blair and that he was also a student at the academy, which piqued Isabella's interest even further. Without wasting a second, Isabella burst through the office door and hurried to the second-year classroom. Upon arrival, she loudly announced that she wanted to see Blair immediately. The clueless students, unaware of Blair's current whereabouts, informed her that he had just stepped out. Meanwhile, the donkey, who was actually hiding under a desk, whispered to his friend Toby to cover for him. Toby, playing along, confirmed to Isabella that Blair had just left. Frustrated but determined, Isabella ordered them to inform Blair that she was looking for him when he returned. As she left, Toby grabbed Blair, his face serious, and asked what he had done to put the school's most feared feminist on his tail. Seeing Toby's concern, Blair began to feel genuinely scared, realizing he might have just stirred up more trouble than he could handle. Toby revealed to Blair that he hadn't just gotten himself into trouble. He had practically signed up for a lifetime of endless beatings from Isabella's fan club. He explained that Isabella's father was the lord of the city, making her the Paris Hilton of the academy. She had a legion of delusional followers who would go to extreme lengths for her. Hearing about his grim fate, Blair considered apologizing to Isabella, but before he could act on it, a group of her fan club members arrived, ready to dish out the first dose of his punishment. The moronic, brainwashed fans were led by an ugly dude named Bud, who didn't hold back in roasting the MC, calling him a worthless piece of garbage destined to be thrown out of the academy for his lack of magical abilities. In an attempt to defend himself, Blair boldly claimed that he would easily pass the upcoming magic test, dismissing it as a mere walk in the park. However, his words only fueled their laughter, as they all knew that Blair had been a useless waste of space in the school for years, unable to even summon a simple fireball. Bud, growing tired of Blair's bravado, moved to smash his head in, but Toby stepped in, warning Bud not to proceed any further. Toby made it clear that he was ready to fight back if they dared to touch Blair. Reluctantly, Bud backed off, knowing that dealing with Toby would complicate things, but he promised to return even stronger. Once they left, Blair breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that Toby had been there to stand up for him. Days later, on the D-Day of the magic test, the students were asked to launch a fireball, which would be the test of their eligibility for the academy. Those who fail will be thrown out like garbage. They were asked to aim at the target and try to hit the bull's eye with their fireball. The first to commence the test was Bud, and he delivered spectacularly like Prince Charming, almost destroying the target with his mighty fireball while Toby went next. Toby summoned his fireball, the size of a spaghetti strand, which managed to kiss the target, but the teacher gave him a pass for even trying. After Toby was Blair on the list, and the bald-headed fat-faced teacher, Anthony, knowing Blair was a complete invalid, had compassion on him and decided to trickily end the test by passing everyone. However, Bud called his attention and told him Blair was yet to prove his worth. Anthony asked Blair if he intended to take the test, but before Blair could respond, the other boys burst into laughter, certain that he couldn't perform any magic and would inevitably be expelled. Meanwhile, Britney, who happened to be passing by, overheard a group of girls eagerly rushing to witness the magicless idiot get humiliated, so she decided to tag along. On the other hand, Blair insisted on trying, which made the other students laugh even harder, and they wondered if the dude was delusional and thought it was a scripted scene from a Hollywood movie. On hearing them laugh nonstop at Blair, Anthony instructed them to silence their filthy mouths and then asked Blair to proceed. That moment, Blair stood a distance away from the target and spoke the magic chant like everyone else, even though he knew it was possible to do magic without the useless chants and gestures. Just then, he summoned a whirlwind that vanished even before it gathered momentum. On seeing the demonstration, the students laughed even more as they never expected anything reasonable to happen. In a matter of seconds, a powerful fireball projected from Blair's hand and scorched the target, destroying it completely. On seeing the unbelievable performance, everyone was absolutely gagged. After the performance, Anthony announced that Blair had passed the test and asked him to come to his office. Britney, who stood and watched, was bewildered and wondered how Blair could, reverse the situation and pull a stunt like the Turkish hitman at the Olympics. On getting to Anthony's office, Anthony asked Blair how he was able to develop his magic skill, and Blair told him he practiced every day in accordance with the Book of Magic. However, the old began to give him a lecture on magic, saying those who didn't have magic have been abandoned by the gods. He commended Blair on his performance at the magic test and told him he had the potential to be an excellent magician. Blair thanked him and told him that although he was initially interested in magic, he would now want to return to his world. Hearing him talk about his world, Anthony was confused and wondered what the nutcase was yapping about. However, he revealed to him that to travel within worlds, he must attain the level of the Holy Mage. He further disclosed that according to legend, only the Holy Mage could master space magic and tear space to other worlds. On hearing him, Blair was interested as he needed a way to return to his world, so he begged Anthony to help him become a Holy Mage. After the magic test was completed, the Academy took a brief break from learning activities. giving Blair some time to study in the library. While he immersed himself in the books, he discovered that magic had 7 levels, starting from the beginner level and culminating in the rank of Holy Mage, which was the highest. Holy Mages, according to ancient records, were mythical beings, and no one had ever seen one in living memory. Blair realized that if he wanted to return to his own world, he would have to become a Holy Mage, as they were the only ones capable of using space magic. Given that Anthony didn't believe in space magic, Blair figured the old fart would be useless in his mission. As he mulled over this revelation, the librarian, an old scrawny man with whiskers like a cat, approached and informed him that his reading session in the library was over. Reluctantly, Blair headed back to class, only to be embarrassed by the other students who couldn't stop talking about his impressive performance during the magic test. They even compared his powerful fireball to that of their teacher, Anthony, and agreed that Blair's fireball had outclassed the teacher's by a wide margin. When he reached his seat, Blair was startled to find Isabella sitting in a very sus position, which scared the out of him. As soon as she saw him, Isabella confronted him, expressing her deep disappointment that the genius Blair she had heard about was actually the same disgusting creep she had intended to annihilate. Blair tried to explain that he wasn't the horrendous loser she thought he was, but she silenced him, calling him a freaky idiot and suggesting he save his excuses for the devil in hell. At that moment, Isabella cast a spell and summoned a fireball, ready to roast Blair once and for all. Just as he began to recite the Lord's Prayer, convinced that his end had come, Britney suddenly appeared and grabbed Isabella's hand, stopping her from turning Blair into grilled tuna. Britney then scolded Isabella for using magic in the classroom, which was strictly prohibited, and then asked both Blair and Isabella to follow her to her office. Once they got to the office, Blair attempted to apologize to Isabella again, and this time, Britney intervened, asking Isabella to let the matter go. Left with no choice, Isabella reluctantly forgave him since Britney had gotten involved. On a lighter note, Britney assured Blair that she would keep to her end of the deal and not stress him to become a mathematician anymore. On hearing that, Blair was relieved, so he asked her if it was necessary to use spells and magical gestures to communicate with magic elements. Hearing his dumb question made Isabella laugh so hard, and she wondered how one person could be ugly and dumb at the same time. However, Britney decided to answer despite knowing only a psychiatric patient would ask such a question. She informed him that no matter how powerful a magician was, they would still need a spell and gestures to communicate the magic ability. She further explained to him that only the gods who gifted man the magic abilities had the power to cast magic without spells and gestures. That moment, Blair had an epiphany and wondered if it was because he was not of the world, and the gods of the world couldn't control him. That's why he was able to cast a spell without using hand gestures and uttering incantations. Blair realized that if he truly wanted to become a powerful magician, he needed to memorize all the theories in the magic books. A few minutes later, Britney revealed the real reason she had asked him to come to her office, the school's journal, where all the academic papers of the kingdom were published. When Britney showed Blair and Isabella the journal, Isabella was stunned to see both her and Blair's names featured in one of the manuscripts. Britney explained that she had derived the summation formula Blair had mentioned earlier and written a paper based on it. Blair, however, wasn't particularly impressed by having his name on the useless publication, as it didn't bring in any money. But then Britney showed him the manuscript bonus, 50 silver coins. The sight of the money shocked Blair, as he hadn't expected such a huge amount for simply providing a mathematical formula. He thought of his worthless life as a brokey, and how he had to work at the library for a mere 2 silver coins for a whole month. He realized that if he quickly grabbed the money, he would be seen as a poor loser with no dignity. He decided to act like a top G and told Britney to keep half of the money for her contribution. However, he was shocked when he even was overly excited and grabbed the money like her life depended on it and gave him his cut. At that moment, Blair had an idea and decided to utilize the opportunity to show off more mathematical ideas that could be published. So he enlightened Britney on the summation formulae of proportional sequence, which excited the dumb teacher. Excited, Britney grabbed his hands and insisted they deduce the formulae and publish it. However, Isabella didn't understand what the nut jobs were talking about, but she sure marveled. On the other hand, Britney had the hardest climax in her entire life, as she wished developing some intense plot with the dude for being a smart ass. The following day, Isabella thought about the whole situation and felt there was indeed something fishy about Blair's sudden mathematical prowess. As she walked to the class, she suddenly sighted Blair in the third-grade teaching building and wondered what the was doing in the building. As she hid, she decided to follow him to find out what the fraud was up to. Meanwhile, Blair was looking for a way out of the academy compound. Anthony told him that if he truly wished to learn more about magic, then he would need to hire a high-level magician outside the school to be his teacher. On noticing the academy's high fence, he leaped over the fence with great effort and landed outside the academy ground. Blair strolled through the city and was amazed by its prosperity and vibrant life. The bustling streets, filled with merchants and magicians alike, painted a picture of a flourishing society. After wandering for a while, he stumbled upon a tall, imposing building, the Magic Association. Before entering, he decided it would be wise to conceal his identity, so he got a mask. Upon entering the building, he wondered why they were ripping off Harry Potter Hogwarts but dismissed the thought. He approached the receptionist and was stunned to see Jasmine behind the front desk. Recognizing her, he tried to keep his composure as she greeted him with a professional smile. Jasmine inquired if he was looking to hire a magic consultant and explained the pricing: 10 gold coins for a senior-level magician, 5 gold coins for an intermediate, and 2 gold coins for a junior magician. Blair, hearing the exorbitant prices, decided to bounce, knowing his pockets were emptier than a desert. But before he could leave, Jasmine stopped him, suggesting that if he couldn't afford a magician, he could apply for a loan card at the library. She mentioned that the association's library housed tens of thousands of magical books, all available for free. The word free sparked excitement in Blair, and he eagerly asked how he could obtain a loan card. Jasmine explained that he would need to show his magic credentials, specifically a certification as a magic apprentice. She added that he could earn this certification by demonstrating his magical abilities in front of a certifier. Despite the challenge, Blair was determined and asked if he could get the certification in the building. Jasmine, although hesitant, informed him that the only certifier available that day was a nutcase. Desperate, Blair didn't care about the certifier's weird behavior and decided to proceed. Jasmine led Blair to the certifier's office, where he encountered Andrew, who looked like a depressed Saitama, and an old man who seemed to be clinging to life by a thread. Upon seeing Blair, Andrew questioned the mask and Blair quickly lied, saying he had burned his face while practicing fireball magic. Jasmine urged them to move to the test hall for the certification, but Andrew, in a display of arrogance, insisted that the test could be done right there in the office, believing Blair couldn't possibly do much damage. Andrew asked Blair to demonstrate his fireball technique by attacking him. Blair hesitated, unsure about attacking the shiny-headed certifier, but the old man with a ridiculous-looking beard encouraged him, assuring him that his magic couldn't possibly harm Andrew. With a deep breath, Blair unleashed his fireball, but to everyone's shock, the flames were hotter than anything they had seen, nearly scorching Andrew to ashes. In the nick of time, the old wizard summoned a magical shield, deflecting the inferno and saving Andrew's shiny head. Everyone in the room was left stunned, realizing Blair was far more powerful than he appeared. After his impressive display of magic, Blair was awarded his Magic Apprentice certification and given a library card by Jasmine. Although her expression remained professional, she couldn't hide her amazement at Blair's unexpected power and wished him success in becoming a great magician someday. Determined to grow stronger, Blair headed straight to the Magic Association's library. Immersing himself in the vast collection of magical books, he quickly realized the knowledge within these texts far surpassed anything he had encountered at the academy. He learned that a magician's level was largely determined by their spiritual power. The higher the spiritual power, the more control they had over magic elements. This control extended to even manipulating the magic elements of lower-level magicians, a fact that astonished him. Blair also discovered that the 4 foundational elements of magic, fire, water, earth, and air, were the building blocks of everything in the world. Other magical elements and phenomena were merely combinations of these 4 elements in specific proportions. This realization hit him hard. If he could master the art of combining these elements correctly, he could potentially create new and powerful magic spells. Feeling both enlightened and overwhelmed by the flood of new information, Blair decided he had learned enough for one day. Any more studying and he risked information overload. Eager to put his newfound knowledge to the test, he rushed back to the academy, ideas buzzing in his mind. Once on the academy grounds, Blair decided to experiment with combining the 4 elements to create a combustion reaction. He carefully manipulated the second most abundant element in the atmosphere, oxygen, mixing it with the other elements in precise proportions. The result was nothing short of explosive. A powerful combustion erupted, rocking the entire academy. The force of the explosion shattered windows and caused tremors that were felt across the campus. The sheer power of the blast startled Blair, but he quickly regained control, stopping the explosion just in time before it could cause catastrophic damage to the school. Just as he was catching his breath, a random student came running toward the scene, no doubt alarmed by the chaos. Panicking at the thought of being caught, Blair immediately took to his heels, fleeing the scene before anyone could identify him as the source of the explosion. The next day in class, Blair was rudely awakened from his daydream by Toby, who gave him a sharp nudge and remarked that only worthless losers slept in class. Toby then shared the news that the academy was buzzing with rumors about a massive explosion that rocked the third building last night, shattering all the windows. The academy was now under investigation, as everyone speculated about who could have unleashed such a powerful magic. Toby noted that only a high-level magician could pull off a spell of that scale. Blair, trying to hide his involvement, casually replied that he had never seen a high-level magician in his life, which left Toby stunned. Toby couldn't believe Blair's ignorance, especially since he had been around a high-level magician for days, hinting at Britney. This revelation shocked Blair, who had been searching desperately for a high-level magician to teach him magic. Without wasting a moment, he rushed over to Britney's office. Upon arriving, Britney greeted Blair with a smile and mentioned that she had been looking for him as well. She proudly showed him the journal published by the Mathematical Society, containing his earlier discovery. However, Blair was not concerned about a stupid paper, and told her he had actually come for something more important. At that moment, he begged Britney to allow him to study with her, which stunned Britney. She told him she didn't understand his sudden change in mind, as he had always insisted on becoming a magician. So Blair explained that even though he liked magic, he also loved maths and wouldn't want any regrets of neglecting one for the other. On hearing those words, Blair became excited, and she held his hands and placed them on her two large dumplings. She then instructed him to come every night after school to study math, and then suffocated him a little with her pillows. Blair's brain started overheating, and then erupted like a volcano, and as he was about passing on to the afterlife, he retorted in discomfort. He then asked her if they could also talk about magic in the math class, which she agreed. Just as he was about to leave, Britney called him back and asked him if the real reason he wanted to study with her was truly for mathematics or because of magic. Blair, worried she might have seen through his deception, answered and told her he just wanted to spend time with her, which excited Britney. Later that evening, Blair also headed to Britney's office to find Isabella there. Isabella, who was disgusted at seeing the shiny asked Britney what the scarecrow face was doing in the office. So Britney informed her that Blair would be studying maths with them, and then instructed Blair to sit beside Isabella. Shortly afterward, the lesson started with Britney asking Blair if a stone was thrown deep into a well. And after a short while, another stone of twice the mass was thrown into the same well. When will the second stone catch up with the first stone? On hearing the question, Blair was having a really hard time with the consistent mention of well and hole. He wondered if Britney's hole was deeper than the well's. However, he pointed out that the two stones would never catch up. But Isabella didn't resonate with his theory, calling him a doofus with no common sense. Britney, on the other hand, revealed to him that according to the sages, the speed at which an object fell was proportional to their masses. Meanwhile, Blair didn't give their sages and insisted they verify facts before accepting nonsense from their said sages. Hearing those words angered Isabella, who wouldn't allow anyone to insult the revered sages. With two of them having conflicting opinions, Blair mentioned that science was rigorous, and that any truth that cannot stand verification was not true and should be discarded. So, to settle the matter, Isabella suggested they bet to know if the sages were right upon verification. Although Blair was initially reluctant to agree to the bet, when he heard 10 gold coins was the price for the bet, it sparked his interest. That afternoon, the group went to a high-rise building to verify the facts about falling objects. Once there, Britney presented two stones with different weights, the heavier one being twice as massive. She asked Blair if he wanted to reconsider, but Blair confidently assured her he was ready to proceed. Britney then summoned a whirlwind, ascending to the top of the building, which left Blair in awe. From the summit, she released both stones simultaneously, expecting the heavier one to hit the ground first. To the lady's surprise, both stones landed at the same time, proving Blair's theory correct. Isabella was flabbergasted. wondering what in the Looney Tunes had just played out before her eyes. Isabella, still stunned, asked Blair how he knew both stones would land simultaneously. Blair casually mentioned that he had once read about it in a book and had experimented on his own, discovering that the law of falling objects wasn't as the book described. Britney realized the historical significance of this moment, understanding that Blair had just overturned a long-held belief with a simple experiment. Blair, however, tried to downplay his achievement, insisting that his name wasn't important and there was no need to make such a fuss. Britney, eager to cement this breakthrough, suggested that Blair and Isabella work together to perfect the new law of falling objects. Although appalled at the thought of working with someone she once considered a disgusting creep, Isabella couldn't resist the allure of being part of a groundbreaking discovery. She agreed to team up with Blair, and together they formulated the Blair-Isabella law of falling. As their relationship began to improve, Isabella promised to have Blair's back if anyone bullied him, and she started to see him as less irksome than she initially thought. Blair, however, wasted no time in requesting his reward from their bet, the 10 gold coins. Isabella handed them over, puzzled by his lack of interest in fame and honor, but his obsession with money. When Isabella asked why money mattered so much to him, it triggered memories of Blair's past life, where he was broke and had to work tirelessly as an underappreciated math teacher. In the present, he told her he cared about money because it allowed him to improve his life. With that, he bid the overwhelmed ladies goodbye and left with the confidence of a top G. The next day in class, Blair thought about how difficult it was for him to sleep in the cubicle where he had always slept, which prompted him to sleep in class. So he decided that since he had just cashed out, it was best that he changed his space to a better one. However, his thought process was rudely interrupted by the ugly-ass bully Bud. Bud approached him and told him a dude named Feege wanted to see him and requested he stood up immediately. But Blair wasted time wondering who the Feege guy was, so Bud grabbed him by his shirt and threatened to beat all the way back to China. That moment, Feege and his minions arrived and asked Bud to step down his high horse. However, Blair wondered why Feege had a hair color that looked like a newborn and his minions looked like depressed anime characters. They stood a while for a staring contest until Feege approached Blair. He sternly warned Blair to stay away from Isabella and never communicate with her again. After delivering his speech, Feege left the classroom with his minions, who seemed eager to rough Blair up. As they exited, Feege bumped into Fat Boy, who was surprised to see them in his class. Toby, noticing the encounter, asked Blair why Feege and his crew had come to see him. Blair played it off, saying they just exchanged a few words. However, Toby wasn't convinced and warned Blair not to mess with Feege, hinting that his days at the academy could be numbered if he did. Toby then revealed that Feege came from a famous and wealthy family and was the youngest son of Viscount Howard. He added that Viscount Howard was a significant figure in the Numbers sect, a group where all the academy teachers were also members. Later, in Britney's office, Blair pondered ways to improve his magic abilities. He realized that his ability to summon magic without the need for spells and gestures was his current edge. However, with thoughts of enhancing his magic skills occupying his mind, he decided to seek information from Isabella. He asked her if it was possible to summon different elements simultaneously, but Isabella, focused on their math assignment, ordered him to finish the problem Britney had given them. Blair, already done with the problem, handed it to her, leaving Isabella in shock as she stared at the paper in disbelief. Blair then asked her how many fireballs she could summon in a single spell. Isabella revealed she could summon 9, which stunned Blair, as he could only manage one. Desperate for help, Blair explained that the magic books he read were useless and never taught him anything of that sort. Isabella reluctantly admitted that her father had trained her, allowing her to learn the skill of summoning multiple magic elements simultaneously. After much pleading, Isabella agreed to teach Blair and took him outside the school building. Once outside, she demonstrated her skill by summoning 9 fireballs at once, leaving Blair amazed. She explained that the key to this ability lay in the strength of one's mental power, allowing a magician to manifest spiritual power in multiple places simultaneously. Blair then inquired if it was possible to summon different magic elements independently. Isabella explained that while possible, it was an incredibly difficult technique, akin to drawing a circle with one hand and a square with the other simultaneously. Meanwhile, Feege and one of his minions were spying on them from a distance. Seeing Blair and Isabella together infuriated Feege, who assumed they were having an affair. His jealousy and anger boiled over, and in a fit of rage he crushed a wall with his fist, signaling his intent to crush Blair's head like a watermelon. On the other hand, Blair started with the practice and summoned his fireball. So Isabella informed him to divide its mental power into 9 parts, but she mocked him, saying it might take him a lifetime for him to be able to summon 9 fireballs, as it took her half a year before she finally got hang of it. Before she could say more, Blair summoned 9 fireballs, which shocked her. She wondered how the class of jerk was able to pull it off so quickly. She became salty and thought the dude wasn't only talented in mathematics, but was also gifted with impressive magic skills. So she yelled at him and told him to stop feeling like hot stuff, and that she also did it in minutes on her first trial. After saying those words, she screamed, warning him not to ask for help any time he encountered any problem later in the future. However, Blair wondered how he had offended her and thought women's mood swings were a major convenience to the entire world. So he decided to chase after her, and when catching up with her, he held her hands and gave her a useless novelty necklace as a peace offering. He thanked her for being the best teacher in the world, and even though he bought the necklace for Britney, he decided to give it to her. At that moment, she looked at the necklace and wondered if there would ever be an end to the dude's brokey status. Nevertheless, she collected the necklace and fled, pissed that the first gift she ever got from a boy was a worthless, ugly necklace. Blair stood dumbfounded and wondered what ladies really considered a green flag for men. However, he decided to lie on the field and take in nature. While he stared at the bright blue sky, he suddenly noticed 3 dumb-looking morons staring down at him. So he stood and realized the goat-faced mofos were Bud and 2 other silly dudes. Just then, Bud reminded him that Feige had instructed him to stay away from Isabella, and since he was as stubborn as a goat, they had come to beat him like a useless thief. Realizing he was greatly outnumbered, Blair decided the best choice would be to run as fast as his legs could carry. As he ran, they chased after him, calling him an and Bud yelled at him, saying he was just a useless coward like his father, who ran away while on the battlefield and abandoned his post. Hearing those words, Blair halted his movement, and Bud tried punching his face, but his fist got scorched. Blair, who was furious, turned and faced them head-on, summoning his 9 fireballs, and then warned them not to insult Blair's father, who died fighting for his country. Noticing it might be their doom any moment, Bud's homies ditched his and screamed. Just then, Bud began to beg for his pathetic life, reminding Blair that fighting was prohibited on school grounds, which made Blair smirk that the idiot knew there was a rule against fighting on school grounds. As Bud continued pleading for mercy, Blair gathered his strength and aimed a fireball directly at Bud's face. But just as he was about to release it, a sudden wave of dizziness overcame him, and he collapsed to the ground like a fallen Vegeta. Bud, stunned by the unexpected turn of events, hesitated for a moment, unsure of what had happened to Blair. Seeing an opportunity, he prepared to make a run for it, but froze in his tracks when he heard a stern voice ordering him to stop. Turning around, he saw Britney and 2 other men, one of whom was Archie, the school's vice president, approaching the scene. Bud quickly tried to defend himself, claiming he had nothing to do with Blair's collapse. Britney, however, wasn't buying it. She sharply told him to shut his mouth, assuming his involvement due to his notorious reputation for bullying Blair. Archie, who had accompanied Britney, scolded Bud harshly, reminding him of the school's code of conduct, and ordered him to report to his office for further penalties. Shortly afterward, Blair started to regain consciousness and nearly passed out again from Britney, enveloping him in her massive melons, which caused him to bleed from his nose from too much body sensation. Britney, concerned about him, was relieved he didn't venture too far into nirvana, and she gave him a heartwarming hug. Noticing the teacher and student's unusual relationship, Archie yelled at them to have some decency. Following this, Archie commended Blair for his contribution to assisting Britney in the area of mathematics. However, Britney tried convincing them that the outstanding contribution was all Blair, and she had nothing to do with it. But the men didn't give a Blair and informed Britney about the Edwin Award. They added that it was important she won the award, as it would mean a lot for the academy. Britney insisted they give the award to Blair instead because he did all the work. Noticing her persistence, Archie enlightened her that Blair was too young and far too useless to be rich in mathematics. However, the men decided to leave and told her to discuss the issue with Blair and come to a conclusion. Moments later, Blair and Britney walked into the school building, and he implored her to receive the award, saying she shouldn't let anyone else take the honor. He further revealed that the honor does not belong to him, and that Britney was not too old to receive an award. Britney was shocked and angry at hearing his words, so she ditched the fool. Blair stood confused and wondered why the ladies in the Manhwa were so touchy. In the following weeks, the mathematics publication was posted on the school board for all to see. Upon reading the publication, students were curious, wondering who this Blair was that co-signed the paper with Britney. As Blair passed by, he overheard the students comparing his achievements to those of the great scholars of the world. Feeling a mix of pride and anxiety, he continued on his way to class. While walking down the hall, Blair heard someone lambasting a student in the next room. Intrigued, he decided to investigate. Peering inside, he found Bud's father furiously berating his son in the presence of Archie, the vice president. The father, seething with anger, called Bud a useless failure and warned that he would be expelled for his pointless brawling. The furious man began hitting Bud like a useless piñata, while also assuring Archie that he would deal with his son even more severely at home. Unimpressed by the father's outburst, Archie coldly informed him that he would have ample time to discipline Bud because the decision to expel him for his bad behavior was final. Realizing the severity of the situation, Bud's father fell to his knees and begged Archie to reconsider, pleading for his son's future. Just then Blair, who had been eavesdropping on the conversation, decided to step in. As Blair entered the room, Bud's eyes filled with resentment, his humiliation deepening as he wished for Blair's existence to be erased. However, Bud's father, desperate to save his son, grabbed Blair's shirt and implored him to forgive Bud and let bygones be bygones. He explained that if Bud were expelled, it would ruin his life. Blair, touched by the old man's plea, told Archie that he had forgiven Bud and did not want him to be expelled. This unexpected act of kindness stunned Bud, who couldn't believe that Blair would stand up for him. Archie, taking Blair's words into consideration, retracted the expulsion order, stating that since Blair had forgiven Bud, the academy would as well. However, he sternly warned Bud that if he caused any further trouble, there would be no second chances. He would be expelled immediately. Bud's father, immensely relieved, compelled his son to apologize to both the school and Blair, which Bud did, albeit reluctantly. Later, as they headed to class together, Bud, still in shock from the turn of events, asked Blair why he had stood up for him after all the cruelty he had shown. Blair simply told him not to disappoint his father again, as life had given him another chance to do the right thing. Touched by Blair's words, Bud thanked him and warned him about the impending danger that Feige was planning. He also revealed that Feige had an uncle who was a vice president at the academy, hinting at the powerful connections Feige had. Several hours later, Blair went to the library for his part-time job, only to be informed by the old administrator with ridiculously long beards that his services were no longer needed and that he could no longer live in the cubicle. The administrator added that this was an order from one of the vice presidents of the academy. With nowhere else to turn, Blair sought help from Britney, who kindly offered him a vacant room in her house, inviting him to move in and become her roommate. Blair wasn't comfortable with the idea of moving in with Britney, knowing that being around her every day and seeing her huge melons would surely shorten his lifespan from sheer stress. However, Britney, desperate to convince him, argued that living together would give them ample opportunity to discuss mathematics and magic. Hearing those words, the disgusting simp agreed, and Britney instructed him to move in immediately. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted when Isabella stormed into the office. Britney casually informed her that Blair would be joining them at the academic exchange party that evening and also mentioned that he would be moving in with her, which completely fried Isabella's brain cells. Furious like a demon possessed, Isabella warned Britney that Blair was a disgusting, cultured creep and that this arrangement was a terrible idea. Despite this, Britney assured her that everything would be fine, insisting that the creepier, the better. She then instructed both of them to go change and prepare for the party. Later that evening, the trio arrived at the venue of the academic party, looking like the Three Musketeers. Britney, surprised at the location, informed Blair that the venue was the Howard residence, which immediately made Blair uneasy as he realized he was in Feige's home. As they entered the luxurious mansion, they encountered Calvin, the vice president of the academy. Calvin immediately demanded that Britney accompany him so he could introduce her to some prestigious scholars in the mathematics field. With Britney occupied, Blair and Isabella were left to navigate the party on their own. Inside the mansion, Blair was captivated by the spread of delicious food and, unable to resist, rushed over and began devouring it like a starved wolf. His gluttonous behavior disgusted Isabella, who quickly dragged him away from the buffet. As they continued exploring the mansion, Blair suddenly stumbled upon an ugly piece of art that looked like the artist had vomited on the canvas. He stared at it in disbelief, wondering how anyone could be so talentless as to produce such rubbish. Noticing his disapproval, Isabella explained that the artwork depicted the 7 bridges of the royal capital, a piece the Howard family was particularly proud of. She was shocked to realize that Blair knew nothing about the 7 bridges. Feige, eavesdropping on their conversation, couldn't resist mocking Blair's presence at the party, calling him a worthless beggar child who only showed up for the food. Isabella, irritated by Feige's insult, snapped at him to silence his disgusting mouth, but the obnoxious Feige, with his goofy appearance and baby-colored hair, continued yapping. Refusing to engage further, Isabella grabbed Blair's hand and dragged him away from the uncomfortable situation. Seeing them holding hands infuriated Feige, prompting him to call Blair a useless weakling who always hid behind women. Blair, unfazed by Feige's taunts, calmly approached him and, with a smirk, asked if he could learn more about the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Isabella tried to stop Blair from delving further into the subject, sensing the trouble it could bring, but Blair insisted on knowing more about the mystery. Feige, seeing an opportunity to belittle Blair, mocked him as a charity case whom Britney had signed out of pity. Isabella, defending Blair, retorted that he deserved the signature on the publication because he had done the work himself. Feige, not missing a chance to humiliate Blair, loudly announced to the crowd that Blair, the so-called mathematical genius, would solve the mystery behind the 7 bridges of the royal capital. Blair, surprised and caught off guard, approached Feige and clarified that he never claimed he could solve any mathematical mystery. However, before he could say more, Britney quickly grabbed Blair, pulling him aside to save him from further embarrassment. Britney warned Blair that getting into a conflict with Feige was a grave mistake because Feige's family was the most powerful in the city. She explained that crossing Feige could jeopardize not only his future in the mathematical society, but also his overall prospects at the academy. She also pointed out that the mystery of the 7 bridges had baffled scholars for years, and Feige was only challenging Blair to solve it because he knew it was an impossible task. Meanwhile, Feige continued to ridicule Blair in front of everyone, relishing the moment. Determined not to back down, Blair resolved to hear the mystery behind the bridges and give it a try, much to the shock of both Isabella and Britney. Feige, seeing Blair's resolve, took the opportunity to share the history behind the mystery. He revealed that the puzzle began with the first patriarch of his family, who had served in the capital hundreds of years ago. At that time, the capital was divided into 2 parts by a river, with 2 islands in the middle. To facilitate passage between the 2 parts of the city, 7 bridges were constructed, connecting the islands to the main city. The patriarch had proposed a challenge: to start in any of the lands, cross each bridge exactly once, and return to the starting point. However, despite the efforts of many scholars over the years, no one had been able to solve the puzzle. Tragically, just as the patriarch had allegedly found the solution, he drowned in the river, taking the secret with him. After listening to the lengthy and boring story, Blair reflected deeply and recalled a similar problem in the real world: the famous 7 bridges of Königsberg, a historical puzzle in mathematics for which there was no solution. He realized that this mystery, like the one in the real world, might also be unsolvable. Blair looked Feige straight in the eye and told him confidently that there was actually no solution to his family's problem. Feige, enraged and disbelieving, laughed maniacally, calling Blair an arrogant donkey who fancied himself on Einstein's level. The ladies at the party, taking their cue from Feige, joined in the mockery, calling Blair an ignorant fool. Isabella and Britney were stunned to see Blair, usually so confident in solving mathematical problems, claim there was no solution to the mystery of the 7 bridges. Feige, infuriated, pressed the issue, demanding to know what his ancestor had supposedly discovered if no solution existed. Blair, lacking a direct answer, suggested that Feige's ancestor might have been a fraud, a statement that only fueled Feige's anger. At that moment, Feige's father, Viscount Howard, a man whose head was shaped like a magical orb, entered the room. He immediately reprimanded Feige for using the honor of their ancestors to assert power over others. Howard approached Blair, offering an apology for his son's disgraceful behavior, but also admonishing Blair for his claim that the 7 bridges had no solution. He insisted that such a statement was slanderous to their family's legacy and urged Blair to retract his words. However, Blair stood firm, maintaining that there truly was no solution. To support his argument, he began to educate the audience on the mathematical complexities of the problem, explaining that the solution was beyond human comprehension and could only be achieved through divine intervention. Blair drew diagrams on paper, meticulously illustrating how it was mathematically impossible to start from one point, cross all 7 bridges exactly once, and return to the starting point. The audience at the party listened attentively and was awed at his brilliance. They realized the dude was actually a smartass, as his idea completely resonated with them. Even the baddies stared at him as they wanted him to plot the graph involving their regions. On the other hand, Britney was totally proud of her daddy, and she wondered what else his smart brain could do apart from solving math. Shortly afterward, Blair was done with the explanation and concluded that the 7 bridges were useless and had no solution. However, Feige was having a hard time in more ways than one as he tried convincing everyone not to pay any attention to the disgusting weirdo. Having heard Blair's explanation, Howard was totally convinced that his sick ancestor had lied to him and his entire generation. He hated the fact that Feige had to be the one responsible for exposing the family to such embarrassment. Just then, the audience began to clown on their family and ancestors, calling them a bunch of worthless liars. Howard was sick of the insults, so he unleashed his anger on his son, punching his face to the ground. He then yelled at Feige for bringing shame and embarrassment to the family. However, this was just the beginning of the embarrassment, as Blair insisted they answered his question. According to the mathematics community rule, since Blair answered Feige's question, it was only fair that the Howard family answered one of his. Upon hearing this, Howard agreed they would oblige and answered his questions. So Blair asked them what the length of the diagonal of a square with the length side of one was. That moment, Viscount Howard answered and told him the answer was 2 squared. Blair responded that he didn't ask for the square of the diagonal, but the length of the diagonal. Howard stood for hours furious, his head big and round like watermelon, and he did not have any brain inside. However, Blair considered his original world and compared it with his recent one. He thought celebrities were more famous and popular than scientists and scholars in his original world. In this world, scientists and scholars worshipped like gods. He used the Howard family as an example of how powerful and influential scholars' family were. He considered the school an organization that integrated politics, academy, and religion. He wondered if the school was similar to the Pythagorean school of his original world. He remembered that the Pythagorean school was once more powerful, but their belief had a loophole. They believed in integer numbers and not real numbers. However, the loophole was finally discovered by one of Pythagoras' students, who found out that the length of the diagonal of a square with a length of 1 cannot be expressed in integer numbers. However, the student was eyes-caved by the rest of the school, who tried to bury the truth. Later on, generations to come discovered the truth and called numbers that are not integer numbers irrational numbers. Meanwhile, the audience at the party couldn't find the answer to Blair's question. Even Britney was confused as to what the answer was. So Blair explained that the answer to his question was not a number they were familiar with. On the other hand, Feige, who was already sick of dealing with all happening, became enraged that his family was being embarrassed. So he turned to Blair and charged at him. As Feige's furious charge closed in on Blair, the room tensed, expecting a brawl. But just before Feige could reach him, his arm was caught mid-swing by Alice, a fellow mathematician and student at the academy. Feige spun around, eyes wide with shock, and glared at the unfamiliar yet surprisingly strong girl. He wondered who she was and why she possessed such strength. Before he could utter a word, his father, Viscount Howard, yelled at him to stop embarrassing their family further. The Viscount, still reeling from the evening's events, offered a stiff apology for his son's reckless behavior, promising that Feige would be disciplined appropriately. He added that they would provide an answer to Blair's question in the coming days. Viscount Howard then approached Blair, bid him a reluctant goodnight, and left the scene, dragging a humiliated Feige behind him. The room's tension eased as the two exited, leaving the partygoers to murmur amongst themselves about the unexpected turn of events. Seizing the moment, Blair approached Alice and tried using his best Discord pickup line, asking her if her legs were a rope, because he would love to be strangled with it. Isabella, feeling jelly, smacked his ugly head for flirting with another girl in her presence. At that moment, Isabella asked the man snatcher what she was doing at the event, and Alice explained she had always attended the event. Britney, who had been watching the scene, confirmed Alice's claim and informed Isabella that Alice's family were famous mathematicians in the city. Alice then approached Blair and introduced herself formally while placing his hands on her 2 enormous dumplings. However, Blair had never felt soft melons like hers, so his brain nearly evaporated from seeing the different sizes of balloons bouncing before him. Meanwhile, Alice thanked him for putting the obnoxious and arrogant Howard family in their place. She added that in the future, she would love to have a private lesson with him. Hearing all she had to say, the top P decided to stick to Andrew Tate's guidelines and declined any private session with the thirsty girl. Blair insisted that Alice should discuss any private matters with Britney first before they could talk about anything further. Alice, seemingly amused, bid him goodnight, promising to talk again when he was all alone. Isabella, however, was still clearly upset by Alice's presence and Blair's flirtatious behavior. In an attempt to pacify her, Blair assured Isabella that Alice wasn't as beautiful as she was, which caused her face to flush with embarrassment and happiness. Calvin entered the scene, addressing them as the superstars of the night. Blair tried to downplay everything that had happened, claiming that he had simply tried to solve a simple problem. Calvin, however, wasn't convinced. He pointed out that the mystery of the 7 bridges was far from simple and had eluded scholars for generations, serving as a significant source of pride for the Howard family. He noted that Blair's revelation could severely damage the Howard family's reputation as a prestigious mathematical lineage. Calvin then looked Blair directly in the eyes and asked him what his true intentions were, wondering why his talents had remained hidden until now. Blair laughed off the question, explaining that Feige had been the one to provoke him by asking a question, and he had merely provided an honest answer. Calvin, somewhat reassured, told Blair that he might be overthinking things but also warned him to be cautious. He emphasized that while the Mathematical Society would always side with the truth, the Howard family was not known for backing down easily. Meanwhile, back at the Howard estate, inside Viscount Howard's office, Feige was receiving a harsh punishment for his reckless behavior earlier in the evening. As the tension in the room grew, a mysterious figure entered and informed Howard that everything was ready and the plan could commence at any time. Howard, cold and calculating, ordered the mysterious person to wait until the manor was empty and to ensure that everything appeared like an accident so that no one would suspect foul play. At that moment, Abel, Feige's older brother, unexpectedly walked in. He questioned Howard about his intentions, specifically why he was planning another eliminating Blair. This shocked Howard, who asked how Abel could possibly be alive after he had already orchestrated his execution. In a panic, Howard grabbed a gun, intending to eliminate Abel once and for all. He demanded to know if Blair was part of some plot against him. Abel, remaining calm despite the situation, denied knowing Blair or being involved in any conspiracy. He'd explained that the recent incident involving the Howard family and Blair had simply provided him with an opportunity to return. Abel then declared that he had come back with the intention of changing the entire Howard family, signaling a dramatic shift in the power dynamics within the household. Howard was left speechless as Abel revealed the deep-rooted corruption within their family. Abel exposed the horrifying truth that the Howard family, once revered for its honor, had been built on a foundation of lies. He accused Howard of knowing all along that the mystery of the 7 bridges had no solution but had kept it a secret to maintain the family's prestige. Over the years, Howard had eliminated anyone who came close to discovering the truth, including his own son Abel. As Abel laid out the facts, Howard's fury boiled over. He commanded Abel to shut up, unwilling to hear more of the damning truth. But Abel continued, pointing out that Blair had already exposed the family's lie in front of the entire mathematics community, something that Howard could not erase by simply annihilating Abel. Abel warned that even if Howard silenced him, the damage was done. The truth was out, and the Howard family's reputation would soon be in tatters. The powerful factions that had once supported the Howards would abandon them, leading to the family's downfall. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Howard's rage subsided, and he sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. Abel, now in control, calmly took the gun from his father. He then delivered the final blow. He announced that he was back to replace Howard as the patriarch of the family, claiming that only he could save the Howard name from complete ruin. Several days later at Britney's residence, Blair was adjusting to his newfound comfort. He had never experienced such luxury, and it felt like a dream. One morning, he wandered over to Britney's room only to find that she wasn't there. Instead, he found a stack of papers scattered across her desk. As he skimmed through them, he realized that Britney had spent the entire night working tirelessly to solve the square diagonal problem he had posed at the party. In the days following the mathematical exchange party, the scandal surrounding the Howard family had spread like wildfire. The revelation that the mystery of the 7 bridges was a fraud shook the mathematical community to its core. As for Blair's question about the length of the diagonal of a square, it had left the community stumped. Unable to find a solution, the scholars started referring to the unknown number as the devil's number, a term that added a dark mystique to the problem. Blair sat down and started going through the stack of papers on Britney's desk, curious to see how far she had gotten with the diagonal problem. As he sifted through her notes, he came across a newspaper article that caught his eye. The headline announced that the Howard family had replaced their patriarch, a move that shocked him. Abel had successfully taken over, just as he had promised. Before he could process the implications, Britney walked into the room, dressed in sus clothing. She moved closer, leaning in with a playful smile and asking why he didn't call her to study together. The poor guy nearly had a heart attack from being so close to her laser blasters, and his nose started bleeding like a classic anime character. Embarrassed and flustered, he quickly tried to compose himself. Later on that morning, Blair decided to make scrambled eggs and tomato, with Britney standing beside him, watching the disgusting mess he was making. So she asked him what he was making, and he told her, but the ancient girl was shocked because she hadn't heard of scrambled eggs in her life. So Blair explained to her that tomatoes mixed with scrambled eggs were most people's favorite food. After making the food, Blair dashed towards the door and informed her he was heading to school, but Britney told him to hold on. She walked towards him and helped him clean up the mess on his shirt, which charged his magnum. So he quickly rushed out of the house and chose to remain a Manhwa protagonist. After the moron left, Blair decided to have a bite of his tasty meal. As she took a bite, she was in heaven as it was the best meal she had ever tasted in her life, which made her legs shake, and her body had a food gas. On the other hand, Blair felt this intense hunger as he walked to school and hated the fact that he cooked but was unable to eat because he had to run away from temptation like a useless simp. Throughout the day, the school buzzed with talk about the recent shakeups, the change in the Howard family patriarch and the mysterious devil's number that had thrown the mathematics community into chaos. Blair, however, was not enjoying the attention as Isabella relentlessly pestered him to give her the answer to the so-called devil's number. Despite his insistence that he didn't know it, she wouldn't let up, constantly nagging him with complaints. Just then, Alice entered the classroom and winked at Blair, causing his brain to short-circuit for a moment. Isabella, noticing her competition, immediately became salty and demanded what the fat face was doing in Blair's class. Meanwhile, the random losers in the class watched in awe as two hot baddies fought over Blair, secretly wishing they could trade places with him. As the girls exchanged rude comments, Blair's stomach suddenly growled, bringing the bickering to a halt. Isabella asked if he was a pig to be hungry so early in the morning. Alice, on the other hand, offered him her bread, and Blair, on seeing the bread, the freak imagined it was her rice cakes instead. However, he collected the bread because he was a starved glutton. That moment, Isabella grabbed his chin and demanded he return the bread to the desperate girl. Blair told her he wanted to reject the bread, but the bread looked too tantalizing even for his ego. Alice insisted Isabel let the poor dude be, which only made Isabella angrier than she was. That moment, Isabella unleashed her bread and gave Blair to eat. On seeing both ladies' bread in front of him, Blair found it impossible to choose one over the other and just wished the situationship was a harem instead. The magnum-craving chicks, furious at each other, stood for staring, hoping to eyes-kite each other with their dangerous stare. To bring an end to the rivalry temporarily, Blair collected both their bread and stuffed it in his facehole like a fetus kid on Snicker bars. The lady's bread nearly choked him to death, but he managed to swallow and cried from how tasty they were. Isabella was excited that her bread was tasty while Alice leaned close to Blair and removed the leftover crumbs from his face, sticking them in her mouth in a sus manner. Noticing that move, Isabella realized that Alice's head game was better than hers, so it got her enraged, bringing out the fire in her. However, Alice was unapologetic as she did what she did with her full chest. She bid Blair goodbye and rushed to class. Meanwhile, Isabella informed Blair she was leaving, but she would be back for his after class, so she stormed out. As she left, Blair thought he was finally relieved and would get a moment of peace, but Toby the fatty brought his own slice of daily trouble. Toby grabbed on his chin and demanded to know how Blair knew Isabella. So Blair explained how they met and even informed him that they went to the mass exchange party together, which stunned Toby. However, Toby remembered that it was on the same maths exchange meeting that the devil's number came to be. A few minutes later, Britney came into the class and started the day's learning activity. As she lectured, she secretly handed Blair bread, who was writing some exercises on the board. He wondered why all the ladies in the Manhwa were giving him their bread, so she explained that she noticed he didn't have breakfast, so she thought it wise to bring it for him in school. Immediately after Britney's lecture, Blair and Toby were joined by Isabella and Jasmine. On seeing bread with Blair, Isabella became furious and demanded to know where the lady's magnet got bread from. However, Jasmine came to his rescue when she changed the topic. She inquired if Blair had met the mysterious man who solved the 7 bridge mystery and came about the devil's number since he attended the maths exchange party. Hearing her question, Blair became tensed and began to sweat, so he told her he didn't see the brilliant man. As Blair struggled to keep up with the web of lies he had spun, he nervously explained to Jasmine that he hadn't witnessed the solving of the 7 bridges problem, because he was, unfortunately, in the restroom. Jasmine, although disappointed, accepted the excuse with a sigh, not pressing the matter further. Later, Isabella invited Blair to her place for a private math session, but Toby, seeing through her intentions, loudly accused her of using math as an excuse for more questionable activities. Isabella, feigning innocence, brushed off Toby's accusations. As school ended, Blair was relieved to have left the classroom early, dodging any potential confrontation with Isabella. However, on his way to practice his magic skills, he was suddenly ambushed by Jasmine, who aimed a dagger at his throat. Her eyes were filled with suspicion as she accused him of being an imposter. She revealed that she had noticed something off about him ever since the math exchange party. How could the Blair she knew, who was once an ugly, disgusting, worthless loser, suddenly become so talented in both math and magic? She demanded the truth, insisting that the real Blair could never achieve what he had. Blair, or rather Chen Lu, stuck to his story, asserting that he was indeed Blair. Jasmine wasn't convinced. She grabbed his chin, searching his eyes for any sign of deception, but just as she was about to press further, she accidentally tripped on Blair's leg and almost fell. Instinctively, Blair caught her, saving her from a nasty fall. She screamed at him to let her go, which he did, but only after she agreed to stop pointing the dagger at his neck. Despite his quick reflexes and his efforts to defuse the situation, Jasmine remained unconvinced. She noted how Blair had suddenly become proficient in both math and magic, and how his manner of speaking had changed drastically. Realizing that Jasmine knew Blair too well due to her long-standing crush on the loser, Chen Lu decided to come clean. He confessed that he realized he was a different person when he woke up from his slumber. He revealed that he came from a world where magic was only a fictional tale told to kids, but the science and technology were way more advanced than what they had here. He added that science was too advanced, that they could travel through space and move from one planet to the other. He further disclosed to her that he was just an ordinary maths teacher in his world, but his maths skills were advanced because the world was also advanced. He told her that when he woke up, he realized he had the same mathematical skills as he did in his world, but unfortunately, he also lost some of his memories. After revealing the truth to her, Jasmine thought only the real Blair could come up with such an insane story, which made him wonder just how much of a nutcase the real Blair was. However, Jasmine felt sad for him and promised to care for him and help him recover his memories. On hearing her, Blair held her hands and thanked her for caring so much for him. Following this, Toby grabbed Blair while he walked home. On their way, they were intercepted by Feige, who apologized to Blair for his earlier action. Seeing Feige embarrass himself by stooping so low to apologize to Blair got the students' tongues wagging. They wondered what might have happened to get the almighty Feige to apologize to the lowly face. After delivering the weird apology, Blair handed an invitation to Blair, requesting his presence at their residence. He disclosed that his brother Abel, the new head of the Howard family, sought his presence for an explanatory meeting for the entire Kingdom mathematics community held that night. He beseeched Blair to come to the dinner party and not hold any grudge. Meanwhile, Toby warned Blair against going, sensing it must be a trap. That night, Blair, pushed by curiosity, arrived at the party despite Toby's warning. Just then, his ears were nearly plucked out by Isabella, who was infuriated he didn't wait for her after class as she told him to. In a matter of seconds, they were approached by Britney, who also came for the dinner party. Blair was shocked to see his entire harem at the party, so Britney informed him that almost all the people from the math circle were present at the party. She added that they came from far and wide even though they didn't receive an invitation. After hearing what she said, Blair was shocked and curious to know why he was the only one who received an invitation to the dinner party. Just then, Alice appeared before his eyes to complete the harem group, which made Isabella angry. Just as the girls intended to start their usual bickering, Britney informed them that the briefing was about to start, so they all rushed inside. Getting inside, Blair was shocked to discover that the seven-bridge portrait had been pulled down. Britney then informed him that massive changes had been made since Abel became the patriarch of the Howard family. Hearing her talk about Abel, Blair was curious and asked her about Abel. She revealed to him that Abel used to be her classmate back in school. She continued and disclosed that Abel was supposed to return to the academy as a teacher, but suddenly disappeared for years for unknown reasons. She added that the guy was a nerd and was only excited when he was solving mathematical problems. Meanwhile, inside the building's inner room, Feige entered and informed Abel that the party was ready and just waiting for his appearance. So Abel got ready and asked Feige if Blair did show up, and Feige replied him, saying the party was filled and it was difficult for him to single out Blair from the crowd. Just then, Abel stood up, ready to attend the gathering, but not without assuring Feige that it was time for a new chapter for the Howard family. As Abel and Feige walked into the hall, everyone was stunned that the head of the Howard family was just a youngin. That moment, Abel welcomed them for coming and brought an old scrappy book, which he revealed contained the Howard family's history. He further disclosed that the book was a note written by the first patriarch of the family. He added that the hidden truth of the Howard family is written in the book. He explained that long ago, in order to solve the mystery of the seven bridges, the first patriarch had to walk the bridges a couple of times. One day, the dude who's built like Splinter and Ninja Turtle thought he had successfully completed a non-repetitive move. Excited, he announced it at a spot. But later that night, after walking for a second verification, he discovered that he had made a fatal mistake. He had remembered the wrong route in repeated attempts, so to save face and avoid bringing shame to his entire generation, he decided to swim to Nirvana. Meanwhile, before he drowned, the useless coward left behind his notes, where he asked his future generations to help him disclose the truth to the public. However, the moronic future generation decided to keep the secrets and refused to reveal the truth to the public that their ancestor was a nutjob who scammed them. They did all that to maintain the honor of the Howard family. Back to the present, Abel decided the end of the scam had come, and the truth could not be hidden forever. So on behalf of the Howard family, he apologized to the public for the actions of his ancestors. On hearing the revelation, the crowd was stunned and couldn't believe the Howard family could keep such a secret for years. Minutes later, a random lady from among the audience asked him why he disbanded the team responsible for solving the devil's number. Abel responded and told her the reason was because they couldn't find the devil's number, and the number didn't exist. The audience was shocked to hear Abel conclude that the devil's number didn't exist. Noticing the confusion in the audience, Abel clarified that based on their existing mathematical system, the number cannot be found. He added that since the devil's number was a whole new area that they had never studied, they would need the proponent of the devil's number, Blair, to step up and lead them. However, the crowd was further thrown into confusion as they wondered who the Blair was. To solve the mystery behind the identity of Blair, Abel informed them that even though at the exchange meeting, it was concluded to keep his identity a secret. Given the intense situation and conflicts surrounding the devil's number, the need for Blair to come out from hiding is paramount. That moment, Britney and the girls were confused about what would happen next. Now that everyone was aware that Blair was the mathematical genius, turned to look at him, but realized the donkey had suddenly disappeared. Realizing that Blair was not in the gathering, Feige informed Abel of Blair's disappearance, so Abel assured him that sooner or later, Blair would come at him. The next day in class, the rumor of Blair being the exceptional genius that came up with the devil's number spread like wildfire. Blair, who was seated in class, embarrassed at the attention he was getting, was approached by Toby, so he cleared the pathetic fat ass that he wasn't interested in clearing stuff about anything to him at that time. Just then, Blair received a tap on his back, and as he turned to look, he was rattled at the gruesome sight. As he stared at the man, he wondered why the Jew was damned so ugly like a depressed gorilla. However, this was Hank, his history professor, who asked him why he was failing his history class. Blair tried explaining to him, but the disgusting fatty continued to ramble and yell at him. Just then, Archie interrupted, asking Blair to come with him. Archie took him outside of the class, where he met Calvin. On seeing Calvin, Blair knew they came for the devil's number. Calvin explained that there was a lot of pressure on them at the academy by the Mathematical Association to convince him to provide the devil's number. After hearing what he had to say, Blair refused to help them. Meanwhile, Toby immediately stormed into Britney's office, informing her that Blair had been kidnapped by the school's vice presidents, which gave her a total shock. Blair, who was taken to the school's meeting room, was interrogated by a bunch of the school's authorities. The associate deans of the academy, the vice presidents, and other governing members all barricaded Blair, demanding he reveal the answer to the devil's number. With no other option, Blair promised to guide them to the answer, but would never disclose the actual number to them. He showed them the difference between integers and rational numbers. He further informed them that the reason they had yet to discover the devil's number was fear. Fear of the truth will destroy the errors they have established as facts for hundreds of years. He further encouraged them to face their demons, saying that fear was a normal phenomenon. He added that it was only through them conquering their fears that they could truly discover the truths and knowledge they needed. After taking the crash course on fear, the useless old farts apologized for behaving like impulsive teenagers by kidnapping him and forcing him to reveal the answer on the spot. Before they could finish their statements of apology, Britney blasted the meeting room door wide open by summoning a powerful whirlwind. On entering the room, she was ready to end them all for kidnapping her baby boy. But Blair informed her that he was still well and kicking like a bouncing baby boy. He told her the old fools didn't hurt him, and they just had a chitty chat, so Britney apologized for her naughty actions. On hearing her apology, Archie told her it was fine that they understand the ways of desperate. Later on, Britney and Blair headed to her office, and on the way, Britney explained her actions for storming into the room like a maniac, as she couldn't bear if anything had happened to him. Blair assured her nothing could happen to him in a school with so many students watching. A few minutes later, Britney asked him why he chose to punish the entire maths community with the devil's number, and if he did that just to create chaos. Will the maths community be able to come up with an answer for the devil's number? If you want a part 2, comment SEVN Bridges. Until next time, my fellow plotters,